So, welcome to my English class. And in this class, I will read with you the poem A Photograph. And this poem is written by Shirley Toulson. Actually, this poem is included in the English syllabus of CBSE board for class 11. So, a photograph. Actually, what is there in this poem? One day, the poet Shirley Toulson saw the photograph of her mother, and this photograph evoked nostalgic feeling in her for her mother and filled her mind with a sense of loss. Why sense of loss? Because her mother died 12 years ago. So this photograph reminded the poet of her mother, and her mother died. So this is that's why this photograph filled her mind with a sense of loss. Now, what is nostalgic feeling or nostalgia? When we think of the past, we get pleasure, and that kind of feeling is called nostalgic feeling or nostalgia. Here in this poem, actually, when the poet was watching the photograph of her mother, she was getting pleasure. But as soon as she thought that her mother died, her mind was filled with a sense of loss. Now, here in this poem, there are three stages in the passage of time. Okay, that means three stages of time. What is there in the first stage? In the first stage, we will find that the poet's mother went to the sea beach with her two cousins. There, she enjoyed the sea waves with her two cousins, and a photograph was also clicked. So this is the first stage of time. Now, what is there in the second stage? In the second stage, actually, the poet's mother saw the photograph which was clicked. That means, when the poet's mother went to the sea beach with her two cousins, a photograph was clicked. And in the second stage, what is happening? The poet's mother was watching the photograph, and she also she was also getting pleasure from watching the photograph. This photograph also reminded her of her past. And what is there in the third stage? Now, the poet's mother died a few years ago, and the poet was watching the photograph, and this reminded her of her mother and filled her mind with a sense of loss. So, this is described in the third stage. So, now I will discuss the poem line by line, word by word. The cardboard shows me how it was when the two girl cousins went paddling, each one holding one of my mother's hands, and see the big girl, some 12 years or so. All three stood still to smile through their hair at the uncle with the camera. A sweet face, my mother's, that was before I was born. And the sea, which appears to have changed less, washed their terribly transient feet. Some 20, 30 years later, she would laugh at the snapshot. See Betty and Dolly, she would say, and look how they dressed up for the beach. The sea holiday was her first, mine is her laughter, both wry with the labored ease of loss. Now she has been dead nearly as many years as the girl lived, and of this circumstance there is nothing to say at all. Its silence silences. Now, particularly in the first stanza, we'll find the first stage of time. The cardboard shows me how it was when the two girl cousins went paddling. Here, cardboard. Actually, on this cardboard, the photograph of the poet's mother was pasted, and the poet was seeing the cardboard, seeing the photograph, and that time the poet could see the past. When the two girl cousins went paddling, each one holding one of my mother's hands. Now let us know the meaning of paddling. Paddling. Paddling means walking through shallow water. Hmm. So what happened? Here the poet's mother went to the sea beach, and she was accompanied by her two cousins, two younger cousins, and she was walking through the shallow water of the sea. We know whenever we go to the seashore, we walk through the shallow water on the beach, and we enjoy the sea waves. Similarly, here the poet's mother was also enjoying the sea waves, and she was walking through the shallow water, and she was accompanied by her two younger cousins, two girls, two cousin sisters, and the poet's mother was holding each of their hands. Actually, with her right hand, she was holding the hand of one cousin, and with her left hand, she was holding the hand of another cousin. And see the big girl, some 12 years or so. So there were three girls, the poet's mother and her two cousin sisters. But the poet's mother was the eldest girl there. She was the big girl. And what was her age? She was 12 years old that time. All three stood still to smile through their hair at the uncle with the camera. See, whenever we visit a place, generally we take our own photograph. So similarly, here the poet's mother and her two cousins posed to take their own photograph. And who was there with the camera? The poet's uncle was there with the camera. The poet's uncle was ready to click, and the poet's mother and her two cousins posed with a smile on their face. And see, smile through their hair. See, on the sea beach, what was happening? The wind was blowing. As a result, their hair became disabled, and their face was covered with their hair, but still their smile was visible through the hair. And that time they posed with a smile, and their uncle, the poet's uncle, was ready to click. A sweet face, my mother's, that was before I was born, and the sea which appears to have changed less washed their terribly transient feet. A sweet face, my mother's. So, see, the poet's mother had a sweet face, had a good looking face. That was before I was born. See, before the poet was born, the poet's mother was young, and we know actually in our young age our faces remain glossy, good looking. So here also the poet's mother was young, and that's why her face was looking good, and her face was glossy also. That indeed that was a sweet face. But what happened? As she was growing older, day by day her face was changing. Actually the sweetness was disappearing gradually from her face, and the sea which appears to have changed less washed their terribly transient feet. Sea, and the sea which appears to have changed less. See, the poet's mother was changing with the passage of time, but the sea was not changing. See, here is the contrast between the poet's mother and the sea. The poet's mother represents the human beings and the sea represents nature. See, the poet's mother face was changing and ultimately she died. So this indicates the brevity of human life. Human life is very brief. According to Bible, uh, a human being can live for 70 years. There is a poem in this in this respect. I can remember a line. Three scores years and 10, 20 will not come again. Three scores mean one score mean 20. So three scores mean 3 into 20. That means 60. And 10, that means 70. So according to Bible, a man can live for 70 years. So see here, the poet's mother's ultimately died, and her face was changing. But see, the sea which appears to have changed place. But see here, the sea represents nature, but nature is not changing. So the nature is permanent, but human life is temporal. Human life is brief, but nature is permanent. So this is the contrast between brief human life and permanent nature. And we all know death is the inevitable certainty of life, and the poet's mother was no exception. Washed their terribly transient feet. See, COFs, COFs were coming, and COFs were kissing their feet. COFs were touching their feet. Terribly transient feet. Their feet were transient. Transient means temporal, not permanent. And here, actually, feet refers to actually transient feet. This transient feet, this is a figures of speech, and it is called transferred epithet. Epithet means adjective. Transferred adjective. Here transient should have transient is qualifying. Transient is describing human life, but transient is transferred before feet. So transient should have taken its place before human life, maybe before the poet's mother. But here transient, the place of transient has been transferred before feet. So that's why this is called transferred epithet. So this is all about the first stanza. Now second stanza. Some 20, 30 years later, she would laugh at the snapshot. See Betty and Dolly, she would say, and look how they dressed up for the beach. So the sea holiday was her past, mine is her laughter, both wry with the labored ease of loss. Some 20, 30 years later, she would laugh at the snapshot. So, 20 or 30 years had already passed. 20 or 30 years ago, her photograph along with her two cousins was clicked. Now, after 20 or 30 years, she was looking at the photograph, and the poet was present with her. And she was telling the poet to see the photograph. Apart from her, there were two girls on the photograph. Who were they? Betty and Dolly. And she was particularly pointing to the dress of Betty and Dolly. How Betty and Dolly dressed up for visiting the beach. Understand? So she was telling the poet to observe the photograph properly. And particularly she was pointing to the dress of the two other girls, her cousins. So this was the reminiscence, and she was getting pleasure from this, and also this photograph was evoking her nostalgic feeling. The sea holiday was her past, and mine is her laughter. So the sea holiday was her past. In the meantime, what happened? The poet's mother entered the family life, and family life is no doubt burdensome for a omen, and she was bound by the duties. So the sea holiday was her past. So many years had passed and she was watching the photograph. So the sea holiday was her past. She was remembering the past, and mine is her laughter. See from here what is and this is about the third stage of time. See, the poet's mother was watching the photograph after 20 or 30 years. That is the second stage of time. Now, mine is her laughter. The poet's mother's laughter became passed to the poet. See, when the poet's mother was watching the photograph, she was laughing, thinking of her past. So that was her past, the sea holiday. Particularly, she was laughing, remembering the funny incidents during the sea holiday. So that was the past of the poet's mother. But mine is her laughter. And seeing the photograph, the poet's mother laughed. So the poet's mother, the laughter of the poet's mother became the past to the poet. So here two past incidents are juxtaposed. Both arrive with the labored ease of loss. See, both rhyming, both are disappointed. Here both the poet and her mother disappointed with the labored ease of loss. See, whenever we see something, it reminds us of our past, and whenever we think of the past, some what to say, some sorrowful memories also flash upon our inward eyes. And here also that happens to the poet and her mother. Both lie with the labored ease of loss. See, the poet's mother was watching the photograph and she was thinking of the past. She was thinking of those funny days. At the same time, what is happening? She was bound by the duties, as she was living in a family. So that became her past. That laughter, that those funny days became her past. So as a result, nowadays, when she had already entered the family life, she couldn't enjoy her days. So this became painful to her. That is indeed a loss of the funny days. She with the labored ease of loss. So as she was bound by certain duties, she couldn't. She means the poet's mother couldn't enjoy the days. So that was indeed a loss, the loss of funny days. And what is the loss to the poet? The poet had a very pleasant life with her mother, but her mother died. So the mother's death was a loss to the poet, but as a result, both right means both the poet and her mother were disappointed with the labored ease of loss. Labored ease, when the poet's mother was watching the photograph, she also tried to ease, she also labored to ease her pain of loss, to ease her sense of loss. What was her loss? The loss of funny days. So that was painful, and she labored hard to ease that pain. And here also see what is happening to the poet. The poet's mother died, so that was a loss to the poet. The poet was also trying, the poet was also laboring hard to ease that pain of loss. And both of them were disappointed. So now, and see, here is a figure of speech. Labored is. So here, two opposite ideas are juxtaposed. Labored is. So this figure of speech is called oxymoron. When two opposite ideas are juxtaposed, that kind of figure of speech is called oxymoron. Here, labor and ease both are opposite ideas. Now, third stanza. Now she has been dead nearly as many years as that girl lived. As that girl lived means the girlhood of the poet's mother. That means, here 12 years. She was 12 years when she visited the seashore, the sea beach. So she has been dead nearly as many years as that girl lived. So 12 years was counted here. So she had been dead nearly as many years as that girl lived. So she died 12, 12 years ago. And that is the reality. And of this circumstance, there is nothing to say at all. So when the poet was watching the photograph, she could realize that 12 years ago her mother died and it was a great loss to her. It was the reality to her, and seeing the photograph, she became speechless. The poet became speechless. She couldn't find what to say. Each silences. She there on the photograph there was the image of the poet's mother, but on the photograph the poet's mother was silent. As she was in the photo, that is just the image of her mother, so her mother was silent. So seeing her mother silent, the poet also became speechless. She couldn't say anything. And here is a figure of speech in the last line. Silence silences. Silence is an abstract idea, and here silence is personified. Silence silences. That means the silence of the poet's mother silences the poet. So silence is personified here. Silence is animated here. So this kind of figures of speech is called personification. So this is all about the poem. I hope all of you have understood. So let's stop here.